The lights were low, the air thick with cigar smoke and anticipation. On that August night in 1962, the Sands Hotel showroom wasn't Apos. Just hosting another Rat Pack performance. It was hosting history in the making. Dean Martin was backstage. Sammy Davis Jr. was mid-song. The crowd was electric. But in the front row, a dangerous man had decided the spotlight wasn't bright enough for him. And in the next few minutes, he'd unleash a shocking act meant to humiliate, control, and degrade. What happened next wasn't part of the script. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't safe. It was raw. It was public. And it would become one of the most legendary moments in showbiz history, when a world-famous singer stood up to a violent mob boss, not with fists or threats, but with something far more powerful. It was the third week of their sold-out engagement, and the Copa Room at the Sands had never felt more alive. The Rat Pack, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, were doing what they did best, laughing, riffing, trading songs, and lighting up the stage with effortless charm. The audience? A mix of Hollywood stars, high rollers, politicians, and men who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. But no one stole the room like Sammy. When it came time for his solo, he didn't just perform. He possessed the stage. His rendition of "I've Got You Under My Skin" wasn't just music, it was an outpouring of soul. Every note, every movement was electric. You didn't just watch Sammy, you felt him. People leaned forward in their seats, breath held. It was art. It was magic. And for a moment, nothing else in the world existed. But it only takes one man to poison perfection. And that man was already watching from the front row, waiting for his moment to strike. At a table just feet from the stage sat a man who didn't clap, didn't smile, didn't even blink unless it was to scan the room for control. Victor Duca, better known as Vic the Blade, wasn't just any guest. He was a capo in the Chicago outfit. A made man with a rap sheet longer than the Strip and a reputation so cold, it made other mobsters nervous. He was built like a pit bull in a silk suit, thick neck, dead eyes, hands that had done things most people wouldn't survive seeing. And tonight, he wasn't alone. 6 of his guys flanked him, all of them loud, all of them drinking like the bottles owed them money. This wasn't just a night out, it was a display, a power play. Vic wasn't there for the music. He wasn't there to be impressed. He was there to remind everyone that no matter how famous you were, no matter how brightly the lights shone, he could still pull the plug. As Sammy sang, Vic leaned in close to his table, muttering jokes under his breath. Racist jabs, mocking impressions, and cruel laughs, just loud enough for his men to hear, but too quiet to stop the show. It wasn't heckling. It was targeted disrespect. Strategic humiliation. Dean saw it from the wings. Frank Sinatra did too. But Sammy? Sammy just kept going, because that's what he'd always done. Smile. Perform. Swallow the pain. Pretend the venom wasn't there. But Vic wasn't finished. He hadn't come to Vegas to be ignored. He came to make a scene. Sammy was building toward the climax of his number, his voice rising, eyes closed, every ounce of soul pouring into that final note. The crowd was transfixed, held in the spell of a man giving everything to his art. And then, pop, a sharp burst cut through the music. A cork flew from the front row. A bottle tilted. And before anyone could react, a stream of champagne shot across the stage, directly at Sammy. The liquid slammed into him mid-note, soaking his tuxedo, splashing into his face, his eyes, his mouth. He staggered back, caught completely off guard. The music collapsed. The band froze. You could feel the confusion ripple across the room like a wave of nausea. The audience gasped. Vic Duca laughed. A long, loud, chest-pounding laugh. His crew followed, snorting and slapping the table like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. And then came the words, slurred but deliberate. "Dance, Sammy. Come on, dance for us. Ain't that what you people do?" The room went still. The electricity vanished. The laughter died. 2,000 people sat frozen in their seats, unsure if they'd just witnessed a joke gone too far, or something much darker. It wasn't heckling. It wasn't drunken foolishness. It was a message, a calculated act of racist dominance. A mobster treating Sammy Davis Jr. not like a man, not even like a performer, but like property. Something to be used. Something to be degraded. And the worst part? Vic did it because he thought no one would stop him. Sammy stood there, drenched in champagne, blinking through the sting, his tuxedo ruined, his dignity soaked. And yet, he didn't flinch, didn't scream, didn't run. He simply turned, slowly, back toward the microphone. He was going to keep going. Pretend it didn't happen. Just like he and Appos, done 100 times before. Because that's how you survived. But before Sammy could take another step, the audience saw something they never expected. Dean Martin walked onto the stage. He wasn't supposed to be on yet. His entrance was scheduled for later in the show. But now he was moving, calm, composed, but unmistakably deliberate. He walked right up beside Sammy, put a hand on his shoulder. A small gesture, but the room felt it. Dean wasn't cracking jokes. He wasn't flashing his famous grin. His face was stone. His eyes locked on the man in the front row. He turned toward Vic Duca. "Excuse me," Dean said, voice smooth, but loud enough to cut through the silence. "Sir, did you just spray champagne at my friend?" Vic grinned, leaning back like a king holding court. "Yeah, I did," he said. "What are you going to do about it, Dean?" Dean didn't blink. "I'm going to ask you why." Vic chuckled, proud of himself. "Because it's funny. I paid good money to be entertained. And watching your little friend here dance." "Stop." Dean's voice turned sharp. "Steel under velvet. Don't finish that sentence." The grin faded from Vic's face. "You telling me what to do?" he asked, suddenly less amused. Dean took a step forward. "I'm telling you what you're not going to do. You're not going to sit in my showroom and humiliate my brother. You're not going to treat Sammy Davis Jr. like he's some kind of trained animal for your amusement. And you're sure as hell not going to use that kind of language in here." The room wasn't silent anymore. It was charged. Every person in the crowd could feel the tension thickening, like a storm gathering between two worlds. Vic Duca was a made man, a killer, a mobster whose name made people whisper. Dean Martin knew exactly who he was, and he didn't care. Vic Duca leaned back, but the smirk was gone now. His eyes narrowed. The room watched. 2,000 strangers frozen in a single moment, caught between fear and awe. "You know who I am?" Vic asked, voice low, dangerous. Dean nodded without hesitation. "Yeah, you're Victor Duca. You're connected. You're dangerous. You've hurt people. I know exactly who you are." He paused, then dropped the hammer. "But none of that matters right now. Because right now, you're just a man who threw champagne at my friend. And I want to know what you're going to do about that." Vic blinked. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't posturing. It was something much worse for a man like Duca. It was dismissal. Dean had stripped him of power, reduced him to a bully with a bottle. And he did it with the whole room watching. Vic scoffed. "Dean, you've got this backwards. You should be asking what I'm going to do to you for talking to me like this." Dean didn't even flinch. "I don't care what you do to me," he said quietly. "But you're going to apologize to Sammy. Right now? In front of everyone." Vic laughed, but it was forced now, hollow. "Or what? Or the show stops." Dean's voice echoed across the room. "Right now? We walk off this stage. Every person here gets their money back. And I make sure they all know why." Vic's eyes narrowed. "You threatening me, Dean?" Dean stepped forward, fearless. "I'm explaining consequences. You thought you could humiliate Sammy because he's black and you're powerful. Because you figured no one would stop you. But you made one mistake." Dean pointed to the stage beneath his feet. "You did it in front of me." The air was electric, dead silent. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was respect. In one moment, Dean had flipped the entire power dynamic. Vic wasn't in control anymore. Dean was. And for the first time in a long time, Vic Duca was being forced to choose. Apologize or become the villain in a story every newspaper in America would print by morning. Vic Duca didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, saw 2,000 faces staring at him. Some fearful, some disgusted, all waiting. His crew sat silently now, the laughter drained from their bodies. The fun was gone. The game was over. And Dean stood tall, not yelling, not posturing, just standing beside Sammy, unshaken, unmoving, undeniable. Vic's jaw clenched. He looked at Sammy, still soaked in champagne, still silent, still watching with the stunned disbelief of a man who'd spent his life swallowing humiliation and had never once seen someone stop the show for him. And that's when Vic realized he'd lost. "I apologize," Vic said at last, voice tight with rage. "It was inappropriate." Dean didn't budge. "Louder," he said, "so everyone can hear you." The mobster's mouth twisted, but he obeyed. "I apologize to Mr. Davis," Vic said through clenched teeth. "It was inappropriate and disrespectful. It won't happen again." Dean nodded. He turned to Sammy, voice gentler now. Sam, you accept his apology? Sammy paused. His eyes shimmered, not from champagne, but from something deeper. Something that cut through decades of pain and silence and made him feel, for the first time in a long time, seen. Yeah, Dean, he said, his voice breaking. I accept. Dean turned back to Vic. Good. Now you and your crew can stay and enjoy the show, or you can leave. But if any of you disrupt this performance again, you'll all be escorted out. And Victor, Dean's voice dropped. Low, dangerous, final. If I ever hear that you've treated any performer like this again, I'll make it my personal mission to make sure every entertainer in Vegas knows never to perform in the same room as you. Are we clear? Vic Duca stared back, furious, humiliated, exposed. Then he gave a small, bitter nod. Dean turned to the band. From the top, the music started again, and Sammy, still drenched, still trembling, stepped back up to the mic. But this time, he wasn't just singing. He was reclaiming the stage. And when the final note rang out, the crowd rose to their feet in a 5-minute standing ovation. They weren't just applauding the performance. They were applauding the man, and the friend who had stood beside him when it counted most. Backstage, the applause was still rumbling through the walls like distant thunder. But Sammy wasn't thinking about the crowd. He was thinking about Dean. Dean was in his dressing room, loosening his bow tie, his hands steady even though the tension of what he'd just done still hung heavy in the air. He'd just stood toe-to-toe with a connected mob boss, in front of a live audience, in a mob-controlled town, and he looked like he'd just finished a round of golf. Sammy walked in quietly, eyes still glassy. Dean, he said, barely above a whisper. Dean turned, gave a small smile. Hell of a show tonight. Sammy didn't smile back. His voice cracked. What you did out there, that could have ended everything. Your career, your safety. You stood up to a man who's ended people for less. Dean waved it off. I couldn't let that stand, Sam. I had a choice. Watch you get humiliated or stop it. That's not a hard decision. Sammy stepped forward, emotion breaking through. You didn't just stop him. You made him apologize. In front of everyone. You risked your life for me. Dean looked him in the eye. You're not just some guy I work with, Sam. You're my brother. Not colleague. Not friend. Brother. And he said it without hesitation, without ceremony, like it had always been true. Sammy fell into his arms, and they embraced, one black, one white, in a town still wrapped in segregation and silence. Two men who had chosen each other. That night didn't just change how Vegas saw Sammy Davis Jr. It changed how he saw himself. For decades, Sammy had been taught to take the pain and keep dancing. Taught to smile through racism, to swallow dignity for the sake of survival. But Dean Martin had broken that cycle, publicly, defiantly. And in doing so, he didn't just protect Sammy's pride. He restored it. From that moment forward, their bond wasn't for show. It wasn't part of the Rat Pack brand. It was something real, something unshakable. They weren't just performers who shared a stage. They were family. Decades passed, but that night at the Sands never left Sammy Davis Jr. The champagne dried. The tuxedo was replaced. But the moment, the feeling of being defended, of matching, never faded. In 1988, Sammy was diagnosed with throat cancer. It was aggressive, the kind that doesn't give you time to make peace with every ghost. But Sammy knew he had to speak to one man, Dean Martin. They met at Sammy's home in Beverly Hills. No cameras, no stage, just two aging legends sitting in silence, surrounded by memories. They talked about the old days, the Rat Pack, the music, the women, the laughs. But then Sammy leaned forward, voice raspy and frail. Dean, do you remember that night in '62? When Vic Duca sprayed me? Dean looked up slowly, the weight of it still present. How could I forget? Sammy's voice trembled. Do you know what that meant to me? He paused, then continued, his words soaked with decades of buried pain. My whole life, I was trained to take it, to smile and keep performing no matter what they did to me. When white men humiliated me, I was supposed to say thank you and ask for more, because that's how black entertainers survived. Dean listened, silent, still. But that night, you said no. You stopped the show. You made him apologize. You told the world I wasn't a joke. I was a man. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe it. Tears welled in Dean's eyes. Sammy reached out, took his hand. You didn't just protect me, Dean. You saved my soul. And I never thanked you properly. He paused, then whispered, So thank you for being my brother, for loving me enough to risk everything, for choosing me when it would have been easier to stay silent." Dean's voice broke. "Sam, you don't have to thank me. You're my brother. That's what brothers do." Sammy nodded slowly. "I know, but I needed to say it before I run out of time." He died 2 years later, on May 16th, 1990. At his funeral, Dean stood at the podium, older, quieter, and more broken than anyone had ever seen him. And in front of that packed church, he told the story of the champagne, the mobster, and the moment that changed both their lives. People ask me why I did it, why I stood up to a dangerous man for Sammy. The answer's simple. Because Sammy was my brother. Because his dignity mattered. Because doing what's right means more than staying safe. He looked out across the mourners. We came from different worlds, different races, different faiths, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that we chose each other. And when you choose someone as family, you protect them, no matter what, no matter the cost. The room wept. And as the service ended, one truth remained in the hearts of everyone who heard that story. Love isn't about blood. It's about choice. And when Dean Martin chose to stand beside Sammy Davis Jr., he didn't just protect a man. He preserved his soul. This wasn't just a story about music or fame or even the Rat Pack. It was about a line drawn in the sand between power and principle, between cruelty and courage, between silence and standing up. Dean Martin didn't have to do anything that night. He could have smiled, kept the show going, laughed it off like so many others had before. But instead, he chose to risk everything, not for applause, not for headlines, but for dignity. In a world where black entertainers were expected to endure humiliation in silence, where men like Victor Duca operated with impunity, Dean Martin did the unthinkable. He stood up, not with fists, not with fury, but with moral courage, with love. And that's what made the moment legendary. Not the music, not the lights, but the simple truth that brotherhood is a choice. Dean chose Sammy. He chose what was right. He chose to say, in front of the world, "You humiliate him, you humiliate me." And that, more than any song, any joke, any sold-out show, is the legacy that truly matters. Because when the curtain falls and the crowd goes home, what's remembered isn't the performance. It's the moments we choose to stand for each other, even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous. That's not just friendship. That's family. That's what made Dean Martin a legend, and what made August 12th, 1962, a night worth remembering forever.